Going on, everybody? It's Key Time coming back with another one to talk about the NBA playoffs. The Eastern Conference Finals are set. The Western Conference Finals are set. But before I get into those two matchups, I want to talk about what happened this past weekend with the Oklahoma City Thunder, Dallas Mavericks, New York Knicks, Indiana Pacers, and last night with the Minnesota Timberwolves going into Denver and winning in an upset. But first, what I'm going to get into is the Oklahoma City Thunder and Dallas Mavericks. Now, Oklahoma City, they got a young team, and they are a force to be reckoned with for years to come. This was just a learning experience for them, and I wouldn't be surprised if they are in this position next year, but on the winning side. So, first, I want to get into how the game started out. First off, the game started out very good for the Thunder. They were up by 10 halfway through the first quarter, and then all of a sudden, the game was tight in the second, third, and fourth quarter. Now, Oklahoma, they led this game for most of the game, but it was Dallas late game situations that helped them in the win. And obviously, there are two players that I am going to talk about for the Dallas Mavericks that really was key and saved the Dallas Mavericks and saved the series for the Dallas Mavericks. And that is P.J. Washington and Derek Levy II. I will get into them a little bit later on in the show. But as far as right now, OKC, they were up by 10. Then they were up by 11 in the third. And it seems like that this series was headed back for a game 7. Then you had Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving have a masterful fourth quarter. They ended up having Luka had 29 points and Kyrie Irving had 22 points. Now Kyrie Irving, he had a slow first half, but he really didn't have a slow first half. He was trying to get his other teammates involved, but the third and fourth quarter, mainly the fourth quarter, Kyrie Irving was in attack mode, and Luka Doncic, he was in attack mode. Not to mention that P.J. Washington, he had 22 points, and most of those 22 points came in the fourth quarter. He was critical. P.J. Washington was critical. Derek Jones Jr. was critical. Derek Levy II was critical, and also P.J. Washington was critical. He made 2 critical free throws late in the game that won the game and the series for the Dallas Mavericks. Now, for the OKC Thunder, congratulations on a good season, and for you getting this far, you have nothing to hang your head low about. OKC, they have a great coach in Mark Danvillette, and also Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is coming back. He is going to be a force to be reckoned with. And also, OKC, they are the third best team in the Western Conference going into next season. So now, I'm going to get to the Mavericks. The Mavericks, they have a daunting task ahead of them playing the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Minnesota Timberwolves, they have been one of those dark horse teams all season. They have Ant-Man. They have Karl Anthony Towns. They have Rudy Gobert. They have Jaden Williams coming off the bench, putting up 20, 25 points per game. And this series is going to be a 7-game series. I am not going to give my prediction on who is going to win this. I need to see the lineups for game one and throughout the series, but I am going to tell you that I will give my series prediction on both of these series with the Dallas Mavericks and Minnesota Timberwolves and the Indiana Pacers and Boston Celtics before their game one start. Now, congratulations to Dallas for winning this series against the OKC Thunder. This is the third time in 4 years that they are going to the Western Conference Finals. Now, Dallas, they have some experience going to the Western Conference Finals because they lost a few years back to the Golden State Warriors in 6. With the Minnesota Timberwolves, they are the new guys on the block trying to set the tone and trying to let their opponents know that this is not going to be a walk in the park. And this series is not going to be a walk in the park. This will be a 7-game series, and I am going to tell you who is going to win on tomorrow's show. Now, the next series I want to talk about is the Indiana Pacers and the New York Knicks. Now, the Indiana Pacers, they had everything going for them in this game yesterday. They shot, this is unfathomable. They shot 80% from the floor in the first quarter. And in the second quarter, they shot 76%. So, basically, 8 out of every 10 shots they were making. They really didn't miss from the 3-point line because they were 13 of 24 from the 3-point line. So they didn't miss much from the 3-point line. And then you have the New York Knicks, the injury-riddled New York Knicks. They didn't have the OG Anunoby only played 4 minutes and then he was injured. Jalen Brunson had a fractured hand. You had Julius Randle. He hadn't been able to go all series. So you're basically going into a fight without any protection and any armor. That is exactly what the New York Knicks did yesterday, because when Jalen Brunson went out, I said basically, I'm like, this game is over, because you had the Indiana Pacers. They would go on these runs, and it would be like insurmountable runs. Like the New York Knicks, the closest they came to making it a game, they were down 6 points. But then you get it down to 6, you get it down to 8, and then all of a sudden, here come the Indiana Pacers, and they go on a 6-7 minute stretch where they score 15 to 20 points. And they go on a run like that, and now it's back up to 20. The largest lead that the Indiana Pacers had was 21 points. But when it came to the New York Knicks, they were trying to keep the game close, and they had got it close. The deficit was up under 10 with about 4 minutes left. And then you have Tyrese Halliburton come down the court and shoot a 3, and it was back up 12, and that was mainly it. So the New York Knicks, one thing I can say about them is this is a rough and tumble team. This team is going to be around 4 years to come. They are going to be in the thick of it come next season. But where the New York Knicks have to get better at is bench production. And what Tom Thibodeau has to get better at is not letting your best players play 35, 40 minutes a night, because that's what they were doing throughout the entirety of the regular season. And you had and you had Josh Hart playing all 48 minutes in all of these games. Not to mention, he was tired for most of those games. That's why I said that the New York Knicks, they have got to get better as far as having point production coming off the bench. They need a couple of bench scorers, 3 bench scorers that can come off the bench and give you 15 from all 3 bench players, because they didn't have that in this series, and that is the reason why they lost this series. Not to mention, they were injury riddled. They dealt with the injury bug all season, and that is what really hurt them in yesterday's game. As far as the Indiana Pacers, they are playing the Boston Celtics tomorrow, and I will give y'all my series prediction on tomorrow's show. But the Boston Celtics and the Indiana Pacers are in the Eastern Conference Finals. Top 2 offensive teams in the NBA. Both of them can score at a record clip. Boston's defense is better than the Indiana Pacers' offense. The Boston Celtics have more scorers, more players that can find their own shot than the Indiana Pacers. This is going to be an epic series, and I wouldn't be surprised if this series go the full 7 games, because you got two top-notch offense in the NBA. You got a good defense with the Boston Celtics, and then you have a borderline average to bad defense when it comes to the Indiana Pacers. So this is going to be an epic series. Now, the last series I want to talk about before I get out of here is the Minnesota Timberwolves shockingly, impressively, surprisingly beating the Denver Nuggets while being down by 20 points in last night's game late in the third quarter. The Minnesota Timberwolves, basically throughout the season, they have been the young guys on the block. They are led by Ant-Man, Karl Anthony Towns. They have Rudy Gobert. He's a defensive specialist, as everybody know. But I noticed something that the Denver Nuggets was doing differently last night. And basically, they had been doing this in all the games that the Timberwolves had won. They had been doing this all series. They were making Nikola Jokic, he had shots. He took a lot of shots, and he had 34 points. He had 34 points, but he took 25 shots to get those 34 points. He wasn't as efficient as he was early in the series in those games that they won. Now, what the Minnesota Timberwolves did, they neutralized Aaron Gordon. They neutralized Michael Porter Jr. They also neutralized Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Christian Braun. Now, Jamal Murray, I knew that he was going to have a breakout game. He had 35 points, and also Nikola Jokic had 34 points. But what hurt the Denver Nuggets, what hurt them all season, and especially in this series, was size. Minnesota Timberwolves, they had much bigger guys with the Minnesota Timberwolves than the Denver Nuggets. The only reason the Denver Nuggets won the first round series versus the Lakers is because the Lakers lacked size and physical stature. If they had 2 or 3 more big guys, the Lakers would have won the first round series versus the Nuggets, because the Denver Nuggets, this has played them not just this series, this has played them for the last 2 or 3 This has plagued them for the last 3 years. If the opponent is bigger than the Denver Nuggets, they will have problems. They will have problems, and that's exactly what transpired last night. Now, as far as the Timberwolves, last night Karl Anthony Towns had 23 points. Jaden McDaniels, he came off the bench and had 23 points. Rudy Gobert had 13. Anthony Edwards, he did not have a good game, but they really didn't need him last night to have a good game because it was basically the Minnesota Timberwolves. They played intense defense. They really didn't allow the other guys on the Denver Nuggets to set up like Aaron Gordon. Aaron Gordon, he was averaging 15 to 20 points a game in this series, but last night the Timberwolves didn't allow him to get to his spots on the floor and to get set up and make those shots. There were always double teams and switches when it came to the Minnesota Timberwolves last night. Now, the Minnesota Timberwolves, they are about to play the Dallas Mavericks. Basically, these two teams, they have the same amount of strength. You got two players when it comes to the Dallas Mavericks, Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. Also, for the Minnesota Timberwolves, you have Ant-Man and Karl Anthony Towns. So, this is mano a mano. Also, for the Eastern Conference Finals, you also have two legitimate scorers in that series. Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam. And on the Celtics side, you have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Both of these series will be epic, and I will give you my predictions on both of those series in tomorrow's show. And with that, those are my reactions to the playoff games from this past weekend. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, click the notification bell to get notified of all of my shows and content and etc. And I always finish off the show. Remember, one last thing. Remember, the key is always on time.